Welcome to Sports Talk Live Buffalo Plus. I'm Sports Director John Scott, joined as always by our insider and Hall of Famer Vic Carucci. Bills traveling to face the Dolphins Sunday at 1. We'll get into the matchup, including Vic's regular chat with an opposing team's beat writer. But we're going to start with the trade deadline.
Yeah.
Because let me tell you, I made the mistake, Vic. I went into the mentions on X Twitter on Tuesday after 4 p.m. passed.
That was a mistake.
It was a mistake. I even engaged more than I usually do with some of our loyal followers. People are ticked off, Vic. People are ticked. Should they be?
No fooling.
Should they be ticked? The Bills did nothing.
Well, should they be? I mean, first of all, that's predictable because everybody wants to make the move, the team to make a move. Even if things had run smoother this season and you took away a 2-game losing streak, they'd still want them to do something dramatic, something that would guarantee a Super Bowl appearance. That's kind of how the fan base, at least through my years, kind of gauged how they think. Well, okay, I was surprised nothing happened. Should people be upset about that? I'm sort of back and forth on that because, first of all, what did we expect, John? We've talked on multiple platforms here on Channel 2 that this team's cap room was minimal. Its ability to do anything dramatic, which means acquiring a player who is likely carrying a pretty big contract elsewhere because he's that impact guy, whatever position, wouldn't fit. And they're not going to make him fit. There's no magic, even though Brandon Beane gets a lot of credit for all those machinations with cap numbers and the staff that he has, capologists, to make it work. I didn't see that happening. Now, what I saw happening, and this is the only surprise I have, is after the Michael Hoyt injury and with the Ed Oliver injury on top of that and with other questions at defensive tackle, that's where I thought something would happen.
They cleared just under $2 million with a Taron Johnson restructure. I know for a fact they had a couple others, as Brandon said. I think that gets you maybe 3+, maybe just under $4 million more. So that's what they were looking. They were trying. Yeah. Brandon Beane said they were trying. I really take exception to those who said the guy wasn't even trying. That just proves you haven't been paying attention for the entire tenure of him.
Right.
Now, people look at the return it took to get Jacoby Myers, or the return it took to get Rashid Shaheed, and they say, why didn't the Bills do that? My response is those guys are complementary wide receivers who certainly would upgrade the group, but is it going to be enough to move the needle to push them even closer to a championship? I say no.
I agree with you. I do understand that any different name, and those are different names, seem better than what's here, because what's here has not moved the needle for the most part. That's a problem, and the problem wasn't addressed at all, and I think therein is the frustration from a fan base. For Brandon Beane's part, whatever he had in mind to try to pursue, there was a ceiling on how far they would go with that from I'm sure from a trade perspective, pick perspective, and from a salary cap impact perspective. So I would have to defer to his caution in doing that. You said it. This guy's reputation, this guy's willingness to go out and be the deal maker guy, and there used to be some, little criticism of that, like, Trader Beane, he just wants to trade for the sake of trading. No, he's trying to make the team better, but when he doesn't make a move, I think there was good reason for it. It wasn't because we're great and let's just stand pat. I know he recognizes what we recognize, that you've got to address something. But truth be told, you don't solve all your team's problems, generally speaking, at the trade deadline.
No, 100%. Also, and Beane indicated this, and it's pretty obvious, the two biggest quote-unquote sellers of the trade deadline were in the AFC East.
Right.
So the Dolphins and the Jets, and we're going to get to both of those teams later here in the show, they're not going to say, well, here's Garrett Wilson, or here's Jalen Waddle. Well, here's someone that we are going to make already the king of the division even stronger, and as we're trying to build from the bottom, make it even harder for ourselves. That wasn't possible.
And again, I didn't read your the comments, and I
it's a hoot.
And I
pour a beverage though.
Before I do, all right, we'll have to do that after the show. What I did expect though was the backlash over just that, like, do something dramatic, and the two dramatic names that came up before this trade deadline were what? Jalen Waddle from Miami, which never was going to happen, and A.J. Brown from the Eagles, which I also expected was never going to happen.
Brian Thomas as well.
And
not going to happen.
Okay, so put those three names. But A.J., you look at the Eagles, you look at Howie Roseman, and I have a pretty good feel for how they handle things. And for all the drama that was boiling there, I didn't see that leading to anything that would force, because that could be a move. All right, Eagles to Bills, NFC to AFC, fine. But it wasn't going to happen. And the cost of doing business with that, not going to happen. And as far as Jalen Waddle was concerned, I know they have they're going to have a new GM. They have an interim GM now. Probably will have a new coach in Miami. We'll get into all that. But there is still the owner of the team. He's the constant, and I think he's sitting back there saying, yeah, we'd want to give the Bills more opportunity to just keep us down in the division. It would be silly.
It takes two to tango. Speaking of wide receivers, so this is the group that they're going to roll with here moving forward. So we know the names here, but there are paths to potentially saying people within the building could make a difference. Do you believe that anyone from this group, whether it be Gabe Davis off the practice squad, a healthy Josh Palmer, can change the direction of an underwhelming wide receiver group?
I don't know. It seems, let's put it this way. We are this far into the season. We're at the midpoint of the 2025 season. And what evidence do we have that those guys are answers? Now, Gabe Davis hasn't been on the field yet this season. We know what his history is with the Bills. We also know his injury history. We know he hasn't done anything overwhelming since leaving Buffalo, and then he comes back. But Josh Palmer, it's just, a constant hurt. Where is his presence on the field and impact? We saw some things in training camp, but this guy was acquired to be a lot more than what we're seeing now. As far as Keon Coleman is concerned, I'm at a point where until he does it, I'm not going to say that, oh yeah, there's potential there and it's going to step up. I got into some of that conversation in training camp. I was a bit of a believer preseason. I said, okay. I said, there's hope here. Still got to see it. I'm at a point now where I'm a doubter, and if he does it, that'll be the surprise to me.
100%. On the defensive line here, again, no additions, no changes made to that group. So internally is where the answers are going to have to come from. We heard this as a theme from Sean McDermott, Brandon Beane, when we spoke and heard with them on Wednesday out of the trade deadline.
Yeah.
We're talking about guys like Landon Jackson, who's been active for just 2 games here, his rookie season. Javon Solomon slid in for the Michael Hoyt role the other night. You have guys coming back from injury. TJ Sanders, hopefully in the next couple weeks. Daquan Jones was actually back at practice here today. Right. Is that collection good enough to bolster a group that I think has actually played pretty well, even with some missing pieces? Well,
the thing that's a bit confounding about what we saw Sunday against the Chiefs, that D-line did step up in a big way. It also had a lot to do with the coverage. Let's not leave that out of the discussion. It was, and the head coach, Sean McDermott made mention of that, I think, right at the beginning, Russian coverage. And they were hand in hand in that game. But the confounding part was, as impressive as it was, and you saw other people contribute to the, A.J. Epinesa, Joey Bosa, et cetera. But it was Michael Hoyt, who was the catalyst of it all, and we know what happened to him. Obviously, Achilles injury, gone for the season, and I think it's so much buzz resulted from what he was doing, and so much it triggered all this good stuff around him that you begin to wonder, taking him out of it, what are we going to see going forward? Is it going to be the same? And, with a Daquan Jones potentially coming back, I think that's where the best hope is, that the role gets filled, or at least multiple people can do that. I'm not trying to make it out that Michael Hoyt was A.J. Hoyt. Okay, Vic. That Michael Hoyt is transformative, all-pro guy, but his impact was immeasurable for that one game. And now I say the rest of this team, with its coverage, if that was a turning point moment against the Chiefs, and it might have been between rush and coverage. Look out, I think something special could be brewing, but I'm kind of temper that a little.
I think TJ Sanders is actually a really big key to soften the
he's
blow
gotta be,
on the
yeah.
interior. Let's look at the Bills injury report because, boy, is it extensive here. Positive things moving forward. Joey Bosa, James Cook, Taron Johnson and Daquan Jones didn't practice Wednesday. They were limited here on Thursday. The big one to look at for me, Vic, is Christian Benford.
Yeah.
Pops up on the injury report Wednesday, not practicing today with a groin injury. Now we're looking, you talk about coverage, Tre'Davious White and Max Harrison as your starters against the Dolphins this weekend.
No, that could be problematic, and you're absolutely right. That can throw cold water on the whole coverage rush or rush coverage conversation because you have to have him in there. I thought he played his best game of the season against the Chiefs. Again, scheming had a lot to do with it as well, but I'd say putting Max Harrison out there, and we've talked about this. Does he merit more than, say, 50% playing time versus Tre'Davious White? Well, now if they're both out there as starters, that could be a bit of an issue when it comes to the Dolphins' ability to exploit that in the passing game.
James Cook is the big one. Here's a look at what I saw in limited work here out at the practice field today. See him working on the ankle. Finished the game against Kansas City over 100 yards, so clearly wasn't hampered that much. He says on Kay Adams' podcast today, I'm good to go. We've heard it before. I kind of just look at the video and take a little snippet of what I saw today. He's not 100%, Vic. Is it even worth it to have him roll out there against the Dolphins?
No.
I know you don't take anyone lightly, but
no,
seriously.
but a little bit of a grimace too on top of that. No, that video's, you have to at least pay attention to it. I'll say this: they can win without James Cook in the lineup in this game. And that's saying a lot because this guy's been the majority of their offense. So, I don't say it lightly. You remove him and say everything will function perfectly. It functioned really well with the passing game as well, right? The efficiency of the passing game and Cook. But it was the and Cook part or the Cook and the passing game part, whatever order you want to put it in. And then to say, is it, Ray Davis, Ty Johnson, can they carry the load? Against the Dolphins, I feel like you can get away with it, at least that game.
We'll see. Quickly, we're going to touch on the Dolphins. Second time the Bills are facing them. The game, the first time around, closer than, frankly, the final score, 31-21, indicates here. The state of them entering the second time they're playing. Yeah,
it's going to be interesting. It's been a long time since they played their last game against the Ravens, an embarrassing game there. Their fans are showing up wearing bags on their heads. It's a disaster, a dumpster fire, whatever we want to call it. How much of that is going to fuel this team to try to show out or show up in what could very well become, not very well, will become, I think, a Bills takeover of their stadium. So I'd say if the only thing that they can latch onto is that if they get off to a slow start, lights out to me.
We were looking at the forecast before the show started. Upper 80s, high humidity here. We've seen that before in a Bills and Dolphins game down in South Florida.
Carry a fan, John.
Let's keep the Dolphins talk going. Vic chatting with Alan Pupar from Sports Illustrated about what's going on with Miami. That's next here on Sports Talk Live Plus. Welcome back to Sports Talk Live Plus. Yeah, we kept our thoughts on this weekend's Bills-Dolphins game just a little abbreviated, but that's because we have Vic's latest guy, an opposing beat writer, here to give us the true scoop on what in the world's going on with Miami right now.
Yeah, so Alan Pupar has covered this Dolphin team for a long time for different outlets in Miami. We go back, I don't know, man,
don't age
20
yourself.
years. Well, I'm gonna have to, and you'll see in the video how he sort of ages himself with the cap he has on, a little throwback type of thing. But anyway, here's Alan's breakdown of the Dolphins. Give me a sense of the state of this football team since the firing of the general manager.
A lot of uncertainty in a sense in, okay, what's next? I think a lot of folks were expecting if the Dolphins were going to make a move, it wasn't going to be just Chris Grier. Maybe it was going to be Chris Grier and head coach Mike McDaniel. Mike McDaniel remains in place. By all accounts, he's going to stay there through the end of the 2025 season, perhaps even into 2026. The Dolphins not making any moves at the trade deadline beyond sending Jalen Phillips to the Eagles for a third-round pick kind of tells you they're not necessarily going to blow this up like the Jets are doing after trading Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams. I think the Dolphins have this feeling of like, look, things have gone very poorly. We're 2-7. There are a few games where they were in it to the end. New England in week 2, Buffalo in week 3, Carolina in week 5, Chargers in week 6. So that 2-7, this is the Dolphins maybe convincing themselves that 2-7 easily could be 4-5, stretching and maybe 5-4. They've played all year long without the right side of their offensive line, James Daniels and Austin Jackson. Maybe they're telling themselves again, if we had those two, if we don't have that bad luck, we're not necessarily like this bad team that our record would show. So let's see what we can do down the stretch with the core that we kept intact, and then we'll reevaluate things at the end of the season.
What's the sense of the attitude in the locker room with all of the uncertainty lingering, especially with the head coach?
It's business as usual. I mean, it's like they're going to proceed, and you've been around long enough to know how that works. Generally speaking, I don't know that guys like Mike McDaniel. In rare cases, you're going to have a coach where the guys really, really, really want him to stay or really, really want him gone. Generally speaking, it's somewhere in the middle where we're going to do our job. We're pros, and those are decisions above our pay grade. The Dolphins have played hard. That's not been an issue. They have not quit on Mike McDaniel. I don't expect them to quit on Mike McDaniel. Just the product hasn't been very good. And again, they've come up short down the stretch too many times. And the operation also hasn't been clean, which would be one argument against Mike McDaniel having been kept in the first place or remaining until at least the end of 2025.
So when these teams last met, the Dolphins definitely were in it pretty much the whole way, very competitive. And it was a surprise and certainly a disappointment for a lot of Bills fans they won the game, the Bills did, but it struggled maybe too much. Is there anything that tells you that this matchup could be similar to that?
The only way I could see it is if the Dolphins have a lot of success running the ball. I think the Buffalo defense is better than was early in the season. Based on what I've observed, the Dolphins now are operating without Tyreek Hill and without Darren Waller. Mind you, they didn't have Waller when they faced the Bills in week 3, but they did have Tyreek Hill. That makes a big difference. Now, in terms of the receivers, it's pretty much Jalen Waddle and Jalen Waddle. But the running game can be good. It can be effective. It was very good against Atlanta in week 8. Maybe not quite as much against Baltimore in week 9. All logic tells you the Dolphins can't match up with the Bills. But then again, we probably would have said the same thing in week 3. And this was one of those games where the Dolphins are going to look back and say, see, we're not that far away, because it was 28-21. Dolphins have the ball. They're like, at the 21-yard line of the Bills. And they looked like they were headed for a game-tying touchdown, maybe going for 2 to take the lead. Who knows? And then there was that pick that kind of basically ended the game. The Dolphins, the overriding theme here is the Dolphins are operating with such a small margin for error. Where can they give the Bills a game? Yeah, but they can't have any of the setbacks that they had against Baltimore, where, again, they outplayed the Ravens in the first half, walked out of there down 14-6. Again, because they were making those little mistakes here and there that they're not good enough right now to overcome.
Yeah, the two big takeaways I have are the differences that we're seeing in both teams since the earlier matchup. And I think that he said it. The Bills' defense is playing better from what he's observed, from what we've observed. I think everyone would believe that to a great extent. And then 2, I think this Dolphin team is weaker. I mean, whatever it had that made that game close, and he talked about the receiving game. Not that that was where they were really killing the Bills, but Jalen Waddle. I mean, even we'll see what Christian Benford's status is, but I have to believe, and Darren Waller's also hurt. I'd have to believe that the Bills' coverage can handle that.
They should. Devon Achane is a dynamic player. Jalen Waddle is dynamic. You just it seems like you only got to worry about a couple guys on there. The secondary third pieces on that roster, that's where bad teams go. They don't have anything after the top. The Bills certainly have depth they should be able to cruise in Miami. Well, that's it for the Dolphins. We're going to get into one team also in the division. Those New York Jets, big-time sellers at the deadline. We'll get into them, plus look at the landscape of the AFC entering Week 10. You're watching Sports Talk Live Plus here on WGRZ Plus. Welcome back here to Sports Talk Live Plus. John Scott, Vic Carucci here. Final thoughts, and we're going to start by taking a look at the AFC standings in totality entering Week 10. Not a lot of movement at the top, even though the Steelers beating the Colts. They still remain the 1 seed. Patriots, Broncos, Steelers, those are your division leaders. Bills, still right there, the top wild card spot. Then you have the Chargers, Jags. Chiefs now out looking in after their loss to the Bills. And look at the bottom, Vic. The Ravens have now entered the picture 2 games out of a final wild card berth as they don't have anyone hurt, amazingly, anymore.
Right.
I say look out for Baltimore.
Yeah, I think that's the conventional wisdom, that they're going to start the surge. And they're in a division where surging to potentially to a division championship it seems realistic. So we'll keep an eye on them. Texans are going to be an interesting team. That's on the Bills' schedule. But and Jacksonville, also interesting. Chargers, very interesting to see them now at 6-3. And, what are they going to do? We know the Broncos are playing tonight. So that 1-2 in that division of Denver and San Diego and Los Angeles is fascinating because of the Chiefs. Are we going to see a season with the Chiefs out of the playoffs?
It's certainly possible. We definitely aren't going to see the Jets in the playoffs, Vic. That streak's going to keep on going. I know you have some thoughts. They get rid of Quinnen Williams and Sauce Gardner at the trade deadline. Who is left for a team that's already at the bottom?
Yeah, not much. Breece Hall,
he's a free agent,
and he's a free agent. And Garrett Wilson. I mean, I know some talk about his potential availability as a receiver. But look, John, this team conducted a classic fire sale at the trade deadline. I talked to a lot of people around the league who didn't see it coming, but now the conclusion is this is all about their head coach deciding, Aaron Glenn, deciding
there
that,
he is. Look at him.
And there he is. Yeah, he's got his hands like that. But deciding that what he inherited as a head coach, who's got I think it was a 4-year, $40 million contract, wasn't, I'm going to say the word trash, but certainly wasn't good enough and overrated. And those were the terms that were coming out of the building, sort of off the record / you knew where they were, wink, wink, you knew where they were coming from, that he inherited all these names you thought were great, Jet players, he didn't think were so great, so he could move on and really blow it up and rebuild this thing. And it is a blow up.
Yeah, they need a quarterback. They now have 5 first-round picks over the next 2 years. Who knows if this upcoming draft is where you go for one, or maybe trade a top 3, top overall pick and load up some more here. But it doesn't look like the New York Jets will be in the conversation with the Buffalo Bills anytime soon.
Nah.
Bills getting the Dolphins Sunday at 1 o'clock down in sunny and, thank God, warm South Florida here. We'll be back next week to talk about more Bills football. With Vic Carucci, I'm John Scott. Thanks for joining us.